The fluorescent lights in Decker hardware buzzed overhead as I stacked another shipment of 2x4s. The familiar weight of honest work grounding me like it had for the past 14 years. My name's Ezra Carter, 36 years old, and I thought I knew what my life looked like. Thought I had it figured out. Steady job, steady marriage, steady future. But steady, as I was about to learn, can rot from the inside out, while you're too busy being grateful to notice. I met Evelyn on a Tuesday that felt like any other. She walked into the store with that confident stride some women perfect in their late 20s, looking for spray paint for what she called a vision project. Her hair caught the afternoon light, streaming through our front windows, and when she smiled at my offer to help, something in my chest shifted into place. "What kind of vision are we talking about here?" I asked, leading her down the paint aisle. "The kind where I turn a beat-up garage sale shelf into something that doesn't look like it survived a tornado," she laughed. And Christ, that laugh. It was genuine, unguarded, the kind that makes you want to hear it again immediately. We talked for 20 minutes about paint finishes and primer, but really, we were talking about everything else. Her massage therapy program, my plans to maybe manage the store someday, the way small towns either trap you or teach you to appreciate the simple things. When I carried her supplies to her Honda Civic, she hesitated with her hand on the door handle. "You know, if you ever need a massage," she said, then blushed hard enough that I could see it in the parking lot shadows. "I mean, for your back, from all the lifting." "I'd like that," I said, and meant it in ways that had nothing to do with my back. A week later, we went to Mickey's Diner on Route 48. She ordered coffee and pie. I got the meatloaf special, and we talked until the waitress started stacking chairs around us. Evelyn had this way of listening that made you feel like the most interesting person in the room, leaning forward with her chin on her hand, asking follow-up questions that showed she was actually paying attention. "I want to have my own practice someday," she told me over our third cup of coffee. "Not just working for someone else's clinic, but really building something. A place where people can come and feel restored." The way she said restored stuck with me for days. Like she understood that most people are walking around with pieces of themselves that don't quite fit right anymore. We dated for a year, and every month felt like discovering a new room in a house I wanted to live in forever. She'd leave little notes in my truck. "Thinking of you," or "Don't lift anything heavier than your smile today." Stupid romantic stuff that made me grin like an idiot at stoplights. When she moved in with me, she brought plants, good coffee, and the kind of energy that makes a place feel like home instead of just somewhere you sleep. The wedding was small, her family and mine, held in the courthouse with dinner afterward at the Elks Lodge. Nothing fancy, but when she said, "I do," while looking directly into my eyes, I felt like the luckiest bastard in central Illinois. Her mother cried. Her father shook my hand like he meant it, and even her brother Michael managed to keep his usual smirk to a minimum. Michael. I should have paid more attention to Michael from the beginning. He was everything I wasn't. Quick with comebacks, always had the newest phone, drove cars that cost more than I made in a year. At family gatherings, he'd hold court at the head of whatever table we were sitting around, telling stories about his latest business venture or investment opportunity. Cryptocurrency, dropshipping, some kind of wellness consulting that seemed to involve a lot of Instagram posts and very little actual work. "The thing about success," he'd say, usually after a few beers, "is that most people are too scared to take real risks. They get comfortable with their little safe lives and wonder why they never break through to the next level." The way he'd glance at me when he said safe lives wasn't subtle, but I let it slide. Family dynamics are complicated, and I figured keeping the peace was more important than calling out every passive-aggressive comment. Besides, Evelyn would always find my hand under the table during these speeches, giving it a squeeze that said, "Ignore him, he's just being Michael." For the first 5 years, that worked. We built something together. I helped her get her massage therapy license, paid for her continuing education courses, covered most of our bills while she established her client base. When she finally got the loan for her own practice space downtown, I spent every weekend helping her paint, install equipment, build the kind of peaceful environment she'd dreamed about. "I couldn't have done this without you," she said the night before her grand opening, standing in the middle of her new treatment room with tears in her eyes. "You believed in me when I didn't even believe in myself." "Partners believe in each other," I told her, and I meant it completely. The business grew slowly at first, then faster. Word of mouth in a town like Decker travels quick when you're good at what you do, and Evelyn was exceptional. She had this intuitive understanding of what people needed, not just physically, but emotionally. Clients would leave her office looking lighter somehow, like they'd set down burdens they'd been carrying for years. By year 6, she was booked solid, making more money than I was at the hardware store. I was proud of her success, genuinely proud. But something had started to shift in ways I couldn't quite identify. The notes in my truck stopped appearing. Our morning coffee conversations got shorter, more focused on logistics than dreams. When I'd ask about her day, she'd give me abbreviated summaries instead of the detailed stories she used to share. "Everything okay?" I'd ask. "Just tired," became her standard response. "It's been a long day." The distance grew so gradually that I almost convinced myself I was imagining it. Maybe this was just what marriage looked like after the honeymoon phase. Maybe successful people naturally become more focused, less available for the small intimacies that used to define us. I told myself these things because the alternative, that something fundamental was changing, was too scary to examine closely. Then came the family gatherings where she'd sit closer to Michael, laughing harder at his jokes, asking more questions about his various business ventures. I'd watch them lean in toward each other during conversations, and something cold would settle in my stomach. Not jealousy exactly, but a recognition that I was becoming peripheral to something that used to center around me. "Michael thinks we should diversify our income streams," she mentioned one evening while we were cleaning up after dinner. "He's been explaining some investment opportunities." "What kind of opportunities?" I asked, loading plates into the dishwasher. "Nothing too complicated. Just ways to make our money work harder for us." The way she said, "our money," felt strange, like she was testing how the words sounded out loud. 3 months before our 7th anniversary, the changes became impossible to ignore. She started working later, taking calls from clients at home, scheduling weekend appointments that used to be our time together. When I'd suggest we do something, see a movie, drive to the lake, even just walk around the neighborhood, she'd sigh like I was interrupting something important. "Can we just have a quiet night?" she'd say. "I'm exhausted." But she wasn't too exhausted to drive to her parents' house twice a week, or to meet Michael for lunch, or to spend hours on the phone with her sister discussing some crisis or celebration I wasn't included in. The math was becoming clear. She had energy for everyone except me. The night before our anniversary, I stayed up late putting together a photo album of our 7 years together. Pictures from our first date, the day she got her license, the morning we signed the lease on the practice space, vacations and holidays and quiet moments that had felt significant when they happened. Looking through them, I could see our happiness was real, documented in genuine smiles and comfortable body language. But I could also see when it started to fade, her posture becoming more formal, my smile getting more forced, the space between us growing wider even when we were standing close together. I wrote a note to go with the album. 7 years of building something beautiful together. Here's to the next 7 being even better. I love you, Evelyn. Thank you for making me a better man. The next morning, she announced we'd be celebrating at her sister's house in Peoria. "They want to throw us a nice dinner," she said over coffee, not quite meeting my eyes. "The whole family will be there." "That's sweet of them," I said, though something in her tone made me uneasy. "What time should we head over?" "Actually, I'm going early to help set up. You can come after work." Another small separation, another way of making our anniversary about her family instead of us. But I pushed down the disappointment and focused on the gesture. They cared enough to celebrate with us. That had to count for something. I left work at 4:30, stopped by the flower shop for a bouquet of white roses, her favorites, and drove the 90 minutes to Peoria with the photo album and a small jewelry box on the passenger seat. The necklace inside wasn't expensive, but it was thoughtful. A silver chain with her birthstone, something she could wear every day. And think of us. Her sister's house was lit up when I arrived, cars filling the driveway and spilling onto the street. Through the front windows, I could see people moving around the dining room, the warm glow of what looked like a celebration in full swing. For a moment, standing on the front porch with my arms full of gifts, I felt genuinely grateful. This was what family was supposed to look like. People coming together to mark important moments, creating memories that would last. I knocked and let myself in, following the sounds of conversation toward the dining room. The scene that greeted me was exactly what I'd expected. A large table set with the good china, candles flickering, wine glasses catching the light. 11 people seated around the table, engaged in animated conversation that paused when I appeared in the doorway. What I hadn't expected was that there was no empty chair. I stood there for a moment, taking in the complete table, the place settings that had clearly been planned without me in mind. Every seat was occupied. Evelyn sat between her mother and Michael, looking perfectly comfortable, not at all like someone whose husband had just arrived for their anniversary dinner. Ezra, her sister called out, not moving from her seat. We were wondering when you'd get here. Sorry I'm a little late, I said, shifting the flowers and gift box to one arm. Traffic was heavier than I expected. I waited for someone to make room, to acknowledge that maybe the guest of honor, half of the anniversary couple, might need somewhere to sit. Instead, they all looked at me with the kind of polite expectation you give to a delivery person waiting for a tip. Michael leaned back in his chair, wine glass in hand, and surveyed the table with theatrical concern. Looks like we're full up here. He paused, letting his gaze sweep from face to face before settling on me with a smile that never reached his eyes. But hey, there's plenty of space in the kitchen with the kids. The words hit me like a physical blow. I actually felt my chest tighten, my breathing becoming shallow. This wasn't a seating mix-up or poor planning. This was deliberate. Very funny, I said, forcing a laugh that sounded hollow even to me. Seriously though, where should I sit? I looked directly at Evelyn, waiting for her to clarify the joke, to tell Michael to knock it off, to show some basic respect for her husband on their anniversary. Instead, she looked up at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Cold, almost clinical, like she was observing an interesting specimen. He's not kidding, she said quietly. The kitchen has a nice table. The kids are almost done eating anyway. The room went completely silent. I could hear the grandfather clock in the hallway ticking, the distant sound of children's voices from the kitchen, my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. Everyone was looking at me now, waiting to see how I'd respond to being dismissed from my own anniversary dinner. This is our anniversary, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. You want me to eat with the kids on our anniversary? Michael took a sip of wine, savoring both the alcohol and the moment. Look, Ezra, if you want to sit with the adults, you need to start acting like one. Maybe when you're contributing to conversations instead of just nodding along, we can make some room. Contributing to conversations? The words came out sharper than I intended. What the heck does that mean? It means, Michael continued, his voice taking on that patronizing tone I'd heard 100 times before, that some of us have moved beyond talking about hardware inventory and weekend fishing trips. Some of us are building real wealth, making real moves in the world. Evelyn was watching this exchange with what I can only describe as fascination, like she was seeing something she'd been waiting for. Not horror at her brother's cruelty, not embarrassment at the scene he was creating, but genuine interest in how far he'd push me. Real moves? I repeated, feeling heat rise in my face. Like what, exactly? Like the kind of investments that could set your wife up for life instead of keeping her trapped in small-town mediocrity. That's when I understood. This wasn't spontaneous cruelty. This was planned. They'd discussed me, analyzed me, found me wanting, and Evelyn had not only participated in these conversations, she'd agreed with them. I looked around the table one more time, seeing faces I'd shared holidays with, people I'd helped move furniture and fix appliances for, family members I'd considered my own. Not one of them looked uncomfortable with what was happening. Not one of them seemed to think there was anything wrong with humiliating me in front of everyone. You know what? I said, my voice steady now, clear. You're absolutely right. I walked to the sideboard where they'd placed the wine, opened the bottle I'd brought, and poured it slowly into the sink. The burgundy liquid swirled down the drain while everyone watched in silence. Then I took off my wedding ring, the gold band I'd worn for 7 years, and placed it next to the empty bottle. I'm not adult enough for this table, I said, looking directly at Evelyn, but I'm adult enough to know when I'm not wanted. I left the flowers and the jewelry box on the counter and walked out of the house. No one followed me. No one called my name. The only sound was my footsteps on the gravel driveway and the engine of my truck starting up. I drove for 6 hours, my mind completely blank, operating on pure instinct. When I finally stopped, I was sitting in my Uncle Pete's driveway in Moberly, Missouri. It was 2 a.m, but his porch light was on. He always kept it on for anyone who might need a safe place to land. Pete opened the door before I could knock, took one look at my face and said, "You want a beer?" That's the kind of man he was. No questions, no judgment, just acknowledgement that sometimes life kicks you in the teeth and you need someone to sit with you while you figure out what comes next. We sat on his porch until dawn, not talking much, just being present with each other. When the sun started to rise, I pulled out a piece of paper from his kitchen drawer and wrote Evelyn a letter. Not angry, not pleading, just clear. "You didn't just humiliate me," I wrote. "You made a choice. I understand now that you've been pulling away for months, and I was too invested in our history to see it clearly. But last night made everything crystal clear." You want Michael's approval more than you want a husband. You want his version of success more than you want a partnership. I'm not going to fight for someone who sits silently while her family treats me like garbage and then smiles while they do it. Good luck with whatever you're building. I'm done. I took a photo of the letter and sent it to her phone, then deleted her number. The response came 3 hours later. Can we talk? Then, I think you misunderstood what happened. Then, you're overreacting. You embarrassed me by leaving like that. I embarrassed her by leaving my own anniversary dinner after being told to eat with the children. The disconnect was so complete, so total, that I realized we'd been living in different realities for months. I spent the next week at Pete's, helping him fix up his garage, organizing his workshop, doing the kind of physical work that keeps your hands busy while your mind processes trauma. Every day, more messages came from Evelyn. First apologetic, then defensive, then angry, then desperate. I didn't respond to any of them. On the 8th day, I borrowed Pete's laptop and started going through our financial records. What I found was a systematic pattern of financial dependence that I'd been too trusting to recognize. Her car insurance was under my policy. Her phone was on my plan. The business registration was in my name because I'd signed the paperwork when she said she was too busy with clients to deal with bureaucracy. The massage therapy business she was so proud of, the one that had made her financially independent, the one that gave her the confidence to treat me like a burden. It was legally mine. Every permit, every bank account, every business relationship was tied to my name and my credit. I called my friend Julian, a paralegal in Springfield, and asked him to review the documents I'd gathered. Jesus, Ezra, he said, after looking through everything. You technically own her entire business. The LLC, the bank accounts, the equipment loans, it's all in your name. That can't be right. It's absolutely right. She's been operating under your business license, using your tax ID number, everything. If you wanted to, you could shut this down tomorrow. The power of that realization was intoxicating and terrifying. I could destroy everything she'd built with a few phone calls, but that kind of revenge felt too easy, too small. If I was going to take action, it needed to be strategic, legal, and complete. I spent the next 3 days documenting everything. Every payment I'd made toward her business, every bill I'd covered, every investment I'd made in her success. The massage table, the office furniture, the laptop she used for scheduling, the website design, the initial marketing materials, thousands of dollars that I'd contributed without thinking twice because I believed we were building something together. When I was done, I had a spreadsheet that showed exactly how one-sided our partnership had been, not just financially, but emotionally. I'd been the foundation she'd built her new life on, and the moment she felt stable enough, she'd started looking for an exit strategy. That's when I decided to make my move. First, I changed all the business passwords, the scheduling system, the payment processing, the business email account, the social media profiles. Everything shut down in a matter of hours. Then I contacted the bank and froze the business accounts pending a review of ownership and signatory authority. The phone calls started immediately. Evelyn called 17 times that day. I didn't answer any of them. On the 18th call, she left a voicemail that I played on speaker while Julian and I reviewed legal documents. "You're destroying my life," she screamed, her voice high and frantic. "This is everything I've worked for. You can't do this to me. I have clients depending on me." Julian looked up from his paperwork and raised an eyebrow. "She's got some nerve, considering she just humiliated you in front of her entire family." The messages from mutual friends started the next day. Her cousin Rachel texted me, "Why did you shut down Evelyn's website? She's freaking out." I typed back, "Because she told me I wasn't good enough to sit at my own anniversary dinner. I'm not helping someone who treats me like trash." Rachel never responded. Evelyn's sister emailed me 2 days later. "I know what happened was rough, but Evelyn is really sorry. She's losing clients every day. Can you at least help her transfer the business to her name?" Now, they wanted my help. After sitting in silence while Michael destroyed me, after watching Evelyn smile while it happened, now they were concerned about fairness. I replied, "She can hire a lawyer. I'm done being used." Then Michael himself sent me a text. "You're acting like a child. Grow up and fix this." I stared at the message for a long time, feeling 7 years of accumulated resentment crystallizing into something cold and hard. Then I typed back, "You sat in my chair at my anniversary dinner and told my wife she deserved someone richer. I left without breaking your nose. That was me growing up." He didn't respond. A week later, Evelyn drove to Uncle Pete's house. She didn't call ahead, Didn't ask permission, just showed up and knocked on the door while I was in the garage helping Pete rebuild a carburetor. When I came around the corner and saw her standing on the porch, I almost didn't recognize her. She'd lost weight, her hair was unwashed, and she was crying the kind of desperate tears that leave your face puffy and your eyes red-rimmed. "Please, Ezra," she choked out. "I made a mistake." I was trying to impress my family, and I didn't realize how it would sound. "I'm so sorry. Please help me fix this." I stood there, looking at the woman I'd loved for 7 years and felt nothing. Not anger, not satisfaction, not even pity. Just a profound emptiness where all those feelings used to be. "You're being cruel," she continued when I didn't respond. "I made one mistake. Why are you punishing me like this?" One mistake. As if 7 years of taking me for granted. 7 years of letting her brother disrespect me. 7 years of building her success on my foundation could be reduced to one mistake. "This isn't punishment," I said quietly. "This is what it feels like when someone stops letting you use them." She tried to step forward, arms outstretched like she was going to hug me. I stepped back. "I love you," she whispered. "No," I said. "You loved what I could do for you. There's a difference." She stood there for another minute, tears streaming down her face, waiting for me to change my mind. When I didn't, she turned around and walked back to her car. I watched her drive away and felt something settle into place inside me, like a door closing on a room I'd never need to enter again. But it wasn't over, not even close. 2 weeks later, I got served with legal papers. Evelyn was filing a lawsuit seeking half of all business profits from the past 6 months, claiming she was entitled to compensation for her contributions to the partnership. The same business that was registered in my name, funded by my money, built on my credit. The same business I just shut down after she tossed me aside like garbage. And now she wanted to be paid for the privilege. I called Julian immediately. "Can she actually do this?" "She can file whatever she wants," he said. "That doesn't mean she'll win. Given the documentation you've put together, she doesn't have a legal leg to stand on." But I wasn't just going to defend myself. I was going to destroy her case so completely that she'd never think about coming after me again. I hired a real lawyer this time, not just Julian, someone with experience in business disputes and asset protection. We filed a countersuit, seeking reimbursement for every penny I'd invested in her business, plus damages for the financial harm she'd caused by attempting to steal my legally owned assets. While the legal battle was brewing, I got a Facebook message from someone named Camilla. No mutual friends, no connection I could identify. "Hey, I don't know you, but I think we should talk." My first instinct was to ignore it. Could be spam, could be some kind of scam. But something about the directness made me respond. "Who are you? What's this about?" "I used to date Michael. He told me some things that you should probably know." My heart started pounding. "What kind of things?" "I overheard Michael bragging to his friends a few months ago. He said your wife would be out of your house by the end of the year. Said she was tired of carrying your dead weight and that he was helping her see she could do better." The words hit me like a physical blow. Dead weight. That's how they'd been talking about me while I was paying for her business, supporting her dreams, believing we were building something together. "Do you have any proof of this?" "I don't have recordings or anything, but I remember details. The bar where it happened, the date, what Michael was wearing. I'd be willing to write a statement if you need it." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because Michael is a piece of crap who destroys everything he touches, and I don't like seeing good people get screwed over." That conversation changed everything. This wasn't just about Evelyn pulling away or growing apart. This was about Michael systematically poisoning my marriage, convincing my wife that I was holding her back, orchestrating my humiliation at that anniversary dinner. And Evelyn had not only listened to him, she'd participated in planning my destruction. The betrayal ran deeper than I'd imagined. It wasn't spontaneous cruelty, it was premeditated character assassination. I met with my lawyer the next day and laid out everything Camilla had told me. We drafted a new strategy that would expose not just Evelyn's financial dependence on me, but the coordinated effort to undermine our marriage. "This changes the entire case," my lawyer said. "If we can show that she was acting in bad faith, planning to leave while still taking financial benefit from the relationship, we can seek punitive damages." While we were building our legal strategy, the business I'd shut down started generating another kind of evidence. Emails from confused clients, appointment cancellations, requests for refunds on prepaid packages. I saved everything, documenting the professional damage Evelyn had caused by operating a business she didn't legally own. Then came the twist I never saw coming. Michael's cryptocurrency consulting business, the one he'd been bragging about for years, got flagged by the IRS. Someone had reported suspicious activity, and when investigators started digging, they found a web of shell companies and questionable transactions that had Michael's fingerprints all over them. But here's where it got interesting. Evelyn's name was connected to several of the accounts. Apparently, Michael had been using her massage business as a front for some of his financial activities. When I'd shut down the business, I'd inadvertently exposed their scheme. The person who'd reported Michael to the IRS? Camilla. She'd been sitting on evidence of his financial crimes for months, waiting for the right moment to destroy him. When she learned that he'd been targeting me, she decided that moment had come. "I told you he was a piece of shit," she said when I called to thank her. "He cheated on me, lied to me, stole money from me." I've been waiting for a chance to return the favor. Within days of the IRS investigation becoming public, Michael disappeared. Some people said he'd gone to Florida. Others thought Texas. No one knew for sure, but everyone agreed he'd run rather than face the consequences of his actions. Evelyn, meanwhile, was dealing with federal investigators asking about her role in Michael's schemes. The massage business she'd been so proud of was now evidence in a criminal investigation. That's when her family started reaching out to me. The same people who'd sat in silence while Michael humiliated me were suddenly very concerned about family loyalty. Her mother called first. "I'm worried about Evelyn. She's falling apart. She needs someone to support her through this." "That used to be my job," I said. "She fired me in front of all of you." "We didn't know what Michael was planning," she protested. "You didn't need to know. You just needed to have basic respect for your daughter's husband. You failed that test." Her sister tried next, then her father, then a parade of cousins and family friends. All of them wanted me to be the bigger person, to help Evelyn through her crisis, to forgive and forget. None of them seemed to understand that forgiveness requires acknowledgement of wrongdoing, and accountability requires consequences. Evelyn had made her choice in front of a room full of people. Now she could live with the results. The legal case proceeded quickly once the federal investigation began. Evelyn's lawyer advised her to settle rather than risk having her connection to Michael's crimes become part of the public record. She agreed to sign over all rights to the business, drop her claims for compensation, and pay a portion of my legal fees. But I wasn't satisfied with just winning the case. I wanted acknowledgement of what she'd done. My lawyer drafted a settlement statement that required Evelyn to admit, in writing, that she had received support and assistance from Ezra Carter that exceeded any reasonable expectation of partnership, and that her claims of entitlement to business assets were without merit. She fought that language for weeks, but eventually signed it. She had no choice. The day the settlement was finalized, I drove back to Decatur and started rebuilding my life. I kept the massage therapy business, brought in a licensed therapist to run it properly, and turned it into something legitimate and profitable. The hardware store promoted me to manager when I showed them I could handle complex negotiations and legal challenges. But the most important change was internal. I'd learned to recognize the signs of disrespect before they became patterns. I'd learned that supporting someone doesn't mean accepting their contempt. I'd learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to be treated badly. 6 months after the settlement, I got a text from Evelyn. "I messed everything up. I miss you." I looked at the message for a long time, remembering the woman who'd walked into my hardware store 7 years earlier, the dreams we'd shared, the life we'd built together. Then I remembered her face when Michael told me to sit in the kitchen, the way she'd smiled while he destroyed me, the months of planned betrayal that led to that moment. I deleted the message without responding. Some endings aren't about forgiveness or reconciliation. Sometimes they're about recognizing that certain bridges should stay burned, that certain choices can't be undone, that certain people have shown you exactly who they are when it matters most. I learned that revenge doesn't require anger or violence. Sometimes it just requires patience, documentation, and the willingness to let people face the consequences of their own actions. Evelyn had wanted to trade up to find someone who met her brother's standards of success. Instead, she'd lost her business, her reputation, her family's respect, and her marriage. Michael had wanted to prove his superiority, to show everyone that I was holding Evelyn back. Instead, he'd exposed his own criminal behavior and destroyed his sister's life in the process. They'd both underestimated what would happen when a quiet man finally decided to stop being quiet. The story ends with me standing in my new apartment, looking out at a view that belongs entirely to me, built on choices that reflect my values instead of someone else's expectations. I've learned that dignity isn't something you can lose, it's something you can give away. And I've learned the difference between the two. Evelyn made her choice at that anniversary dinner. I made mine in the months that followed. The difference is that I made mine with my eyes wide open, understanding exactly what it would cost and exactly what it was worth. And that's how I learned that sometimes the kitchen table is exactly where you need to be. Not because someone else put you there, but because you chose to leave the other table behind. The phone rang as I was writing this, caller ID showing Evelyn's number. I watched it ring 4 times, then go to voicemail. A few minutes later, the notification chimed. I didn't listen to it. Some conversations are over before they begin, and some chapters close themselves.